What's up everyone and welcome to this video. In this video we're going to be taking a look at the 10th answered question in the book Some Answered Questions. Some Answered Questions is a book that was compiled I believe in the 1920s and it poses a series of questions that were answered by Abdul-Baha. The topics vary, some are regarding the different manifestations of God, others are about divine will, some others about fatalism, science and religion, and all kinds of pretty interesting topics. And quite a few of them actually go into specifics about certain biblical passages, which I think many of you will find interesting as well. So the one that we're taking a look at today is rational proofs and traditional arguments from the sacred scriptures. Today at table, let us speak a little of proofs. Had you come to this blessed spot in the days of the manifestation of that most resplendent light, entered the court of his presence, and beheld his luminous countenance, you would have recognized that his utterance and his beauty were in want of no further proof. How numerous the souls who, upon attaining his presence, became at once confirmed believers, dispensing with any further proof. Even those who were steeped in the deepest hatred and denial would, upon meeting Baha'u'llah, testify to his greatness, saying, "This is indeed a distinguished man, but how regrettable that he makes such a claim, for whatever else he might say would be acceptable." Yeah, I think there was even a story, I'm pretty sure that this has been confirmed, that someone was sent to assassinate Baha'u'llah, and then upon meeting him, like, he just dropped his gun or his sword and just totally recanted for everything that he did. Some really interesting stories regarding this. Now, since that luminary of truth has set, all stand in need of proofs, and so we have been occupied with providing rational proofs. So that right there, the luminary of truth has set. So basically that's talking about his passing away. Let us mention another, and this undeniable proof should alone suffice any fair-minded soul. It is that this illustrious being advanced his cause from within the most great prison, whence his light shone forth, his fame encircled the globe, and the word of his glory reached both east and west. To this day such a thing has never come to pass, if the matter be examined with fairness. But there are certain souls who, even if they were to hear every proof in the world, would not judge fairly. Governments and peoples with all of their might failed to resist him, while he, alone and single-handed, wronged and imprisoned, accomplished whatsoever he had purposed. I will not mention the miracles of Baha'u'llah, for the hearer might say that these are merely traditions which may or may not be true. Such, too, is the case with the Gospel, where the accounts of the miracles of Christ come down to us from the apostles and not from other observers, and are denied by the Jews. Were I nonetheless to mention the supernatural feats of Baha'u'llah, they are numerous and unequivocally acknowledged in the East, even by some of the non-believers. But these accounts cannot be a decisive proof and testimony for all, since the hearer might say that they are not factually true, as the followers of other denominations also recount miracles from their leaders. For instance, Hindus recount certain miracles of Brahma. How can we know that those are false and that these are true? If these are reported accounts, so too are those. If these are widely attested, then the same holds true of those. Thus, such accounts do not constitute a sufficient proof. Of course, a miracle may be proof for the eyewitness, but even then he might not be sure whether what he had beheld was a true miracle or mere sorcery. Indeed, extraordinary feats have also been attributed to certain magicians. Yeah, that's like something that I've heard quite a bit. Is like even with like I think it might have happened with Jesus, like providing doing certain miracles or whatever, and people would say, "Oh well, this is just some sort of magic. This is not real or whatever." So I can understand like the wisdom and not placing much emphasis on miracles themselves. So I mean, sure you could probably argue that many miracles may have indeed occurred. But just like was mentioned here, they're probably only efficient at acknowledging some sort of divinity for the person that sees them, as opposed to everyone else. Oops. Moreover, most of the miracles attributed to the prophets have an inner meaning. For instance, it is recorded in the Gospel that upon the martyrdom of Christ, darkness fell, the earth shook, the veil of the temple was rent in twain, and the dead arose from the graves. If this had outwardly come to pass, it would have been a stupendous thing. Such an event would have undoubtedly been recorded in the chronicles of the time and would have seized with dismay the hearts of men. At the very least, the soldiers would have removed Christ from the cross or would have fled. But as these events have not been recorded in any history, it is evident that they are not to be understood literally, but according to their inner meaning. Our purpose is not to deny, but merely to say that these accounts do not constitute a decisive proof, and that they have an inner meaning, nothing more. Accordingly, today at table we will refer to explanations of traditional arguments drawn from the sacred scriptures. For all that we have spoken of thus far have been rational arguments. So I guess basically what he's been talking about is that the arguments put forth are in terms of like a sense of logic and of like, specific maybe theocratic thought or some kind of philosophical thought or arguments, whereas this next section is going to be based upon spiritual proofs from the scriptures themselves. So it's basically going to use scripture as a source of evidence. Since this is the station of searching after truth and seeking the knowledge of the real, that station wherein the sore athirst longs for the water of life and the struggling fish reaches the sea, wherein the ailing soul seeks the true physician and partakes of divine healing, wherein the lost caravan finds the path of truth and the aimless and wandering ship attains the shore of salvation, the seeker must therefore be endowed with certain attributes. First, he must be fair-minded and detached from all save God. His heart must be entirely directed towards the supreme horizon and freed from the bondage of vain and selfish desires, for these are obstacles on the path. Furthermore, he must endure every tribulation, embody the utmost purity and sanctity, and renounce the love or hatred of all the peoples of the world, lest his love for one thing hinder him from investigating another, or his hatred for something prevent him from discerning its truth. This is the station of search, and the seeker must be endowed with these qualities and attributes. That is, until he attains this station, it will be impossible for him to gain the knowledge of the Son of Truth. Yeah, to me that makes sense. Like, you have to have your personal investigation of truth, so you have to be objective, because if you want to determine what a true reality is, you can't let your own biases one way or another affect the outcome. And I think that's something that should be applied more to science in this day. In some of my other videos, I'm constantly talking about that, how where even if like a specific claim is just, not believed by modern science, and if there is some evidence to support that it could be true, I think it should at least be investigated, just to discern one way or another. Just let the truth, determine the outcome. Let us return to our theme. All the peoples of the world are awaiting two manifestations who must be contemporaneous. So I guess that means that the manifestations must be contemporaries, that kind of thing. This is what they all have been promised. In the Torah, the Jews are promised the Lord of hosts and the Messiah. In the Gospel, the return of Christ and Elijah is foretold. In the religion of Muhammad, there is the promise of the Mahdi and the Messiah. The same holds true of the Zoroastrians and others, but to belabor this matter would prolong our discourse. Our meaning is that all have been promised the advent of two successive manifestations. And I think this line right here, but to belabor this matter would prolong our discourse, I think this is actually very wise, because I think there's a lot of merit to something being short, and there's a lot of validity in something being wise with few words. I think that was like either Mark Twain or, well, I think all those people, like Socrates, Mark Twain, Benjamin Franklin, like you remember their short epithets, like the short little quotes that they had to say, not so much like, their long, discussions about whatever. So I think there's a lot of merit to keeping something simple. Keep it simple, stupid, that kind of thing. It has been promised that through these twin manifestations, the earth will become another earth. All existence will be renewed. The contingent world will be clothed with the robe of a new life. Justice and righteousness will encompass the globe. Hatred and enmity will disappear. Whatever is the cause of division among peoples, races, and nations will be obliterated, and that which ensures unity, harmony, and concord will be promoted. The heedless will arise from their slumber, the blind will see, the deaf will hear, the dumb will speak, the sick will be healed, the dead will be quickened, and war will give way to peace. Enmity will be transmuted into love. The root causes of contention and strife will be eliminated. Mankind will attain true felicity. This world will mirror forth the heavenly kingdom, and the earth below will become the throne of the realm above. All nations will become one nation. All religions will become one religion. All mankind will become one family and one kindred. All the regions of the earth will become as one. Racial, national, personal, linguistic, and political prejudices will be effaced and extinguished. and all will attain everlasting life under the shadow of the Lord of hosts. Now, one must prove the advent of these twin manifestations by reference to the sacred scriptures and by inference from the sayings of the prophets. For our intention now is to provide arguments drawn from the sacred scriptures, since rational arguments establishing the truth of these two manifestations were presented at table a few days ago. The book of Daniel fixes the period between the rebuilding of Jerusalem and the martyrdom of Christ at 70 weeks. For it is through the martyrdom of Christ that the sacrifice is ended and the altar destroyed. This prophecy thus refers to the advent of Christ. And what he's going to go through here next, I think, is a pretty common, at least I think it is, a pretty common explanation of biblical prophecy. Then again, I guess it probably depends upon the church. These 70 weeks begin with the restoration and rebuilding of Jerusalem, concerning which 4 edicts were issued by 3 kings. The first was by Cyrus in 536 BC, and this is recorded in the first chapter of the book of Ezra. The second edict regarding the rebuilding of Jerusalem was issued by Darius of Persia in 519 BC, and this is recorded in the 6th chapter of Ezra. The third was issued by Artaxerxes in the 7th year of his reign, that is in 457 BC, and this is recorded in the 7th chapter of Ezra. The fourth edict was issued by Artaxerxes in 444 BC, and this is recorded in the 2nd chapter of Nehemiah. I can never say that. What Daniel intended is the third edict, which was issued in 457 BC. 70 weeks makes 490 days. Each day, according to the text of the Bible, is 1 year, for in the Torah it is said, "The day of the Lord is 1 year." Therefore, 490 days is 490 years. The third edict of Artaxerxes was issued 457 years before the birth of Christ, and Christ was 33 years old at the time of his martyrdom and ascension. 33 added to 457 is 490, which is the time announced by Daniel for the advent of Christ. But in Daniel 9:25, this is expressed in another manner, that is, as 7 weeks and 62 weeks, which outwardly differs from the first statement. Many have been at a loss to reconcile these two statements. How can reference be made to 70 weeks in one place and to 62 weeks and 7 weeks in another? These two statements do not accord. In reality, Daniel is referring to 2 different dates. One begins with the edict Artaxerxes issued to Ezra to rebuild Jerusalem and corresponds to the 70 weeks which came to an end with the ascension of Christ, when sacrifice and oblation were ended through his martyrdom. The second begins after the completion of the rebuilding of Jerusalem, which is 62 weeks until the ascension of Christ. The rebuilding of Jerusalem took 7 weeks, which is equivalent to 49 years. 7 weeks added to 62 weeks makes 69 weeks. And in the last week, the ascension of Christ took place. This completes the 70 weeks, and no contradiction remains. So that's a pretty impressive explanation of that, I think. So if you ever had any, questions regarding why perhaps those two statements contradict each other, I think that's a good answer to that. Now that the advent of Christ has been proven through the prophecies of Daniel, let us establish the advent of Baha'u'llah and the Bab. So far we have only provided rational arguments. Let us now turn to traditional ones. In Daniel 8:13 it is said, "Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed, until it says, At the time of the end shall be the vision. That is to say, how long shall this misfortune, this ruin, this abasement and degradation endure? Or when will the morn of revelation dawn? Then he said, 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed." Briefly, the point is that he fixes a period of 2,300 years, for according to the text of the Torah, each day is 1 year. Therefore, from the date of the edict of Artaxerxes to rebuild Jerusalem until the day of the birth of Christ, there are 456 years, and from the birth of Christ until the day of the advent of the Bab, there are 1,844 years. And if 456 years are added to this number, it makes 2,300 years. That is to say, the fulfillment of the vision of Daniel took place in AD 1844, and this is the year of the advent of the Bab. Bab means gate in Arabic. He's basically considered kind of like a John the Baptist for Baha'is. Examine the text of the book of Daniel and observe how clearly he fixes the year of his advent. There could indeed be no clearer prophecy for a manifestation than this. Yeah, and that's like so many people like even before Abdul Baha's. Well, I guess this was during Abdul Baha's time. So many people were thinking along the same lines, I guess, in terms of this interpretation of biblical prophecy. That I believe it was I don't think it was the Templars, but Millerites. I forget exactly, but I think there was a German sect of Christianity that actually sold all of their stuff and moved to Israel. And I think they're probably still there. They still have their church there. And people were buying ascension robes. Churches were selling pretty much all of their material assets. And even in the Middle East, like the Muslims were getting ready for the return of the Mahdi. So it's like there was like a big worldwide fervor for the return of Christ in 1844. In Matthew 24:3, Christ clearly says that what Daniel meant by this prophecy was the date of the Advent, and this is the verse. As he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming, and of the end of the world? Among the words he uttered in reply were the following, When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Thus he referred them to the 8th chapter of the book of Daniel, implying that whoever reads it should grasp when that time shall be. Consider how clearly the advent of the Bab has been specified in the Torah and the Gospel. Let us now establish the date of the advent of Baha'u'llah from the Torah. This date is calculated in lunar years from the revelation of the mission and the emigration of Muhammad. For in the religion of Muhammad, the lunar calendar is used, and all the ordinances regarding religious observance have been expressed in terms of that calendar. In Daniel 12:6, it is said, And one said to the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, How long shall it be to the end of these wonders? And I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand unto heaven, and swear by him that liveth forever that it shall be for a time, times and a half, and when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. As I have already explained, the meaning of day, no further explanation is needed. But let me briefly say that each day of the Father is equivalent to 1 year, and each year consists of 12 months. Thus, 3.5 years makes 42 months, and 42 months is 1,260 days, and each day in the Bible is equivalent to 1 year, and it is in the very year 1260 from the emigration of Muhammad, according to the Muslim calendar, that the Bab, the herald of Baha'u'llah, revealed his mission. So that's kind of like the Muslims were also reading this form of prophecy in terms of like the Old Testament, and they were expecting, like their promised one to arise as well. Afterwards, in verses 11 and 12, it is said, And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate be set up, there shall be 2,290 days. Blessed is he that waiteth, and cometh to the 1,330 days. The commencement of this lunar reckoning is from the day of the proclamation of the prophethood of Muhammad in the land of Hijaz, and that was 3 years after the revelation of his mission, because in the beginning the prophethood of Muhammad was concealed, and no one knew of it save Khadiji and Ibn Nawfal, until it was publicly announced 3 years later. And it was in the year 1290 from the proclamation of the mission of Muhammad that Baha'u'llah announced his revelation. So there's a lot to unpack in this, but I think Abdul Baha does a great job of breaking everything down. But I think that the main emphasis is on the fact that throughout the world there were a wide variety of religions that were awaiting the promised one. And I think we'll end it there. So let me know what you think. Did you find these comments or these explanations to be interesting? Do you disagree with them? If so, let me know. I appreciate you checking out this video, and until next time, take care.